Good morning and welcome to the 17th meeting of the Citizens Participation and Public Petitions Committee. We have an apology this morning from Fergus Ewing, but I'm delighted to say that we have Marie McNair who's joining us for the first time live in the committee room rather than joining us online. So welcome to you, Marie, this morning. Agenda item 1 is simply committee members to agree to take business in private. That's items 4 and 5, which relate to the evidence we're about to hear and also to the committee's work programme. Are members content to take those items in private?
Agreed.
Thank you. So that brings us to agenda item 2, which is the consideration of continuing petitions. And following on from the evidence session we held at our last meeting, we are starting with petition number 2089 to stop more national parks in Scotland, lodged by Deborah Carmichael on behalf of the Lochaber National Park No More Group. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to suspend any action to create further national parks in Scotland, to instruct an independent review of the operation of the current national parks, including assessment of the economic impacts on businesses and industries within the two parks, including but not exclusive to farming, forestry, crofting and angling, to conduct a consultation with representatives of rural businesses and community councils in order to help to frame the remit of the said independent review. At that previous meeting I referred to a moment ago, on the 30th of October, we heard from two groups. The first group was Denise Brownlee of the No Galloway National Park Campaign Group, Mary Dawson from the National Farmers Union Scotland, Nick Kemp from Parks Watch Scotland, and Ian McKinnon from the Lochaber National Park No More campaign. And then we heard from Rob Lucas from the Galloway National Park Association, and John Mayhew from the Scottish Campaign for National Parks. Today we're going to be taking evidence from Peter Rockcliffe, Head of People and Places at Nature Scot, and Eileen Stewart, Deputy Director of Nature and Climate Change, Nature Scot. A very warm welcome to you both. Mr Rockcliffe, I'm actually genuinely intrigued to know what Head of People and Places actually is, because I was trying to sort of, I can understand the people bit, I was trying to understand the places bit. So, I mean, could you just explain what the title means?
I'm in charge of a national team in Nature Scot, and that deals with the people side of our remit, not the HR side, but the engagement with nature, including national nature reserves and national parks.
And the places bit is?
The place is about nature and people come together in a place. So placemaking is a really important part of that connection to nature.
OK, thank you very much. That explains it to those who might be following along and wondering, as perhaps we did. Well, we're going to move straight into questions, as we've done on the other occasions. Please feel free to add anything in particular that you might want to in the event, and there will be an opportunity later if you feel we've not touched on anything that you would very much like to have said. And I'm going to invite Maurice Golden to lead the initial theme of questioning.
Thank you, Convener, and welcome, panel. And probably start at the beginning. What sort of evidence and research was conducted when assessing the existing national parks to inform whether a new one should be put in place?
Shall I start? The national parks, the existing national parks have been in operation for a number of years. As you know, they have national park plans and they have regular reports to their board, and they have their own targets, monitoring and assessment that goes on. So there's a strong record within those national parks of delivery, and we've obviously worked with them on a number of projects to restore nature, to tackle climate change and to support communities and economic development. So I think there's quite an established body of evidence about their impact. So that was really behind, the proposal to develop a new national park. And there was actually a consultation that was done in 2022 that we carried out, which surveyed over 1,000 representative individuals across Scotland. And that showed that 89% of the respondees were supportive of new national parks. So there was a body of kind of weight of evidence and public support that was gathered, and that obviously helped inform government's thinking about national parks were effective. They were addressing the climate and nature emergency, and that there should be more national parks in Scotland.
Thanks for that. And it might be quite interesting in terms of any further research around, we see it with, for example, onshore wind, where Scotland's broadly supportive of onshore wind until the onshore wind is close by. So there is that element to things. I'm just interested, obviously the consultation period is just starting, but I'm interested in what the vision particularly is for Galloway National Park, and therefore I'm interested in how communities can make an assessment on whether they want that in their area. So is the vision something very similar to the existing national parks or something slightly different?
I think that's still to be determined, and that's what the consultation will explore. The proposal that was assessed by Scottish Government and was the basis for this proposal came from a lot of work done by the Galloway National Park Association and the Biosphere, and they worked together and put together quite an inspiring bid, and that was supported by the local authorities and a range of parties that they engaged with. And that presented a really sort of vibrant, kind of forward-thinking, progressive view of what a national park in Galloway could do. And that was about working together with landowners, farmers, foresters, to try and coordinate work at a regional scale, to try and identify opportunities for restoring woodlands, identifying peatland restoration, a number of kind of quite positive things. They presented a view about how visitors could be managed, the area could be promoted, and that could be coordinated at scale. And I think that's what national parks can bring to an area. They're able to work across boundaries with local authorities, with other public bodies, and to do things in a coordinated way. So managing visitors across different sites, bringing together individuals to present farming and to do things collectively, collaboratively. So the basis of what we're consulting on has really come from that exploratory work that was done by the people on the ground that presented that application. But I'll invite Pete to just add a little bit of flavour, because he's obviously seen a lot of that in the development as well.
Thanks, Eileen. The vision is in the consultation that's been set out. The issues are, I guess, the case for a national park is part of what we're consulting on. When we provide advice to ministers, I guess we'll be taking the consultation messages and trying to shape that advice to provide that sort of clarity of vision which ministers can think about when deciding if they want to proceed with designation.
Thanks for that. I'm slightly confused. Is the consultation around, if you like, various iterations of the Galloway National Park, whether that be geographic, what it might house in terms of infrastructure, and or is it about whether it should go ahead or not?
Well, it's about both of those things, absolutely. Fundamentally, we've been asked by government to develop a proposal for what a new national park could do, and then consult on whether there's a strength of opinion about whether that proposal should go ahead. So we have to do the former and present a case of what a national park could do in practice, and that, I think, is illustrated in the consultation document. But there are options in there, and we've tried to present the consultation as very open, so it could, have a number of different sizes and scales. But it's definitely also an option that there not be a national park. And there could be other alternatives. And that's one of the things that we have asked in the national park. What are people's views on whether there should be a national park or not? But also, are there other alternatives that could do an effective job and address the challenges in the area? So it's as open as we can make it, but there has to be a proposal to consult on. So you have to present a picture of what a national park could do based on the evidence that we've seen from the national parks that exist in Scotland already. So I hope that addresses that
I think it does, but it does lead me to quite a concerning aspect of this, in the sense that how can communities make an assessment on whether they want something when that something isn't defined? And even if you're looking at, for some people, Loch Lomond and Trosses National Park without Loch Lomond Shores would be beneficial. For others, they might want something of that scale in terms of the economic benefits. When you layer on the proposals around climate change and biodiversity, then there could be quite competing and compelling visions over what the Galloway National Park is doing. And I wonder if you considered doing the consultation almost in two parts to gain the views and then showcase that to communities so they can actually make a decision on what might be delivered as a result of that. Does that make sense?
I think it does. The feedback we got, we obviously undertook quite an extensive engagement phase. We had over 60 meetings with a range of different stakeholder groups, local authorities, community councils, and the feeling and the response we got from those meetings is that people wanted to see detail. They wanted to see some flesh on the bones so they could get in and think through, I like this, I don't like that. And so that's what we've tried to present, that there is enough flesh on the bones that you can see a national park is something I support or not. I can see how it would affect my interests and respond to the things I'm passionate about. But I think we felt it was still very clear that many people hadn't made their mind up, and the consultation is layered in that way, so you could make clear your overall views, but you can say, I like this, but I don't like that, or, you know, I would support a national park, but only if it was this size or had these powers. So I think the consultation is structured in such a way that we'll get that depth of information and be able to present some really good feedback to Scottish Government and advice on what we are hearing from communities of interest, local communities, and the wider stakeholder engagement that we undertake. So there's lots of different elements to the consultation as well. There's lots of events where we'll be picking up that quality of insight that I hope will help us present a really clear and informed picture to ministers. I don't know if Pete wants to add any more to that.
I think it's probably just worth saying or emphasising this is an iterative process, which can stop at any stage in that process, but it starts with quite a simple ministerial proposal, doesn't contain much detail apart from this area. And then it ends with the Scottish Parliament either approving or rejecting a designation order with the detail of the park, its powers, its governance and its prescription for the area. And in between there are at least 3 stages of consultation. This is a first stage, the first formal consultation on it. We then advise ministers on what people have said to us. They then proceed or not proceed. If they do decide to proceed, they'll develop a draft designation order, which is similarly subject to formal consultation. That will include a detailed boundary, a draft boundary and a detailed set of arrangements for its powers and governance. And then there is parliamentary scrutiny of the draft of a designation order as it's taken through Parliament, and that will involve, as it did last time, presumably, committee discussions and evidence sessions as well. So there is a lot of opportunities to engage in this iteration, and I guess the legislation was definitely based on the fact that it wasn't, national parks couldn't be imposed. We couldn't have a blueprint, which we just described on all areas that were going to be national parks. Had to be a lot of bottom up in that process. And I appreciate that then does cause quite a lot of confusion, I think, about the process and what are you being asked in the processes that follow. But it's actually a very inclusive process that we're trying to do here. And our advice to ministers is only advice. No decision to actually designate this park has actually been made yet. Ministers will take that step in the light of our advice come spring next year.
Okay, final question, convener. Nature Scot sets out on its website that farmers and crofters do not face additional bureaucracy within national parks and can receive additional support. However, NFUS Scotland have said that the majority of members feel that existing national parks have failed to make a positive contribution to farming and crofting. How do you respond to those concerns?
We're very mindful that the farmers have expressed some strong views, and we are continually engaging with them. And I think Ms Dawson said at the last session you had that we'd had an open and good engagement with them, and we continue to meet with regional representatives. And we've reached out to the chair of NFUS Scotland to say what else could we do, because we really want to make sure that all farming views are represented, and we hear from farmers in existing parks. And There are a number of events. In fact, the Regenerative Farming Network has established an event, and they're bringing farmers from the national parks in Cairngorm and Northumberland to event shortly in Creebridge. I think it's in the beginning of December. So I think it's important that farmers take time and explore what might happen, listen to farmers elsewhere and think through the positives and potentially negatives. And we hear both those sides. The NFUS survey that they undertook a short while ago, I think there was 1,900 responses, but actually from what we understand, 300 of those were based in the Galloway area. So what we want to make sure is that we're hearing from the views of the farmers in Galloway, and that they have an opportunity to think through and listen to farmers elsewhere and make sure that they understand the opportunities as well as the potential downsides. And opportunities that we have heard and seen are things like there are farming networks in both Cairngorms and in Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Parks. They are working together, sharing information, talking about how they can make their farms more resilient, more resistant to climate change, how they can invest in works to support peatland restoration or woodland generation. And they're having a really positive impact, and farmers want to engage, and they are working with the park authority. So I think there's a mixed picture, and we just want to make sure that those views are fully represented and people have the opportunity to explore and learn for themselves. And then we will obviously reflect those views back in the consultation report. So I think that it's an ongoing discussion, and I think as people see the detail in the consultation survey and have an opportunity to discuss and explore these things further, those views may evolve, but whatever we get presented with in the end, we will feed that back as fully and frankly as we can.
So just to confirm here, so NFUS have said that existing national parks failed to make a positive contribution to farming and crofting. What is different about the Galloway National Park that will change that, or is that assessment going to be what the farmers and crofters in Galloway face?
Well, we don't know precisely what a national park will look like in Galloway, because obviously those elements are still to be decided. But I think it's for the farmers in Galloway to express what they want, and then, obviously for a national park has some scope to do things, to grant powers, to bring people together. So any national park in Galloway would be tailored to the circumstances. Obviously, the farming situation in Galloway is very different from the existing national parks. We have dairy industries. We have, a different sort of makeup. We obviously have hill farms as well. So we are working with those farmers to say, what is a national park? What are the opportunities it provides for you? What are the concerns? And we will then see if there are ways that we can, see if their views evolve when they explore that in a bit more detail. Pete's been involved in a lot of the discussion with the farmers in an NFUS representative, so he might want to add to some of that.
And it's been a good discussion, and we've really welcomed the opportunity to talk to NFUS colleagues and other farming networks throughout Galloway. We have, in the consultation paper, tried to look at some of the drawbacks as well as some of the advantages of national parks. Most of the regulation for farming in national parks is the same as it is in any part of Scotland, mainly done by Scottish Government. And the funding is provided directly through Scottish Government. The parks don't have any control over that. There are differences in relation to some of the planning aspects, which have impacts for some farmers and not impacts for other farmers. So farmers have to make up their minds on this. NFUS, in responding to our 2022 consultation, did highlight, they reiterated their no position at that point, but they did highlight that some of our members have said they benefit from living and farming in existing national parks, and some can foresee opportunities from the creation of new ones. So it's not a yes/no discussion at the moment we're having, and we wouldn't expect it to be yes and no until I guess we get the NFUS response and the farming response to the consultation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And the second theme is looking at the drivers for designating more national parks and including those alternative approaches. And David Torrance, I'm going to invite you to lead us through this section.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning to witnesses. The key drivers for more national parks are support economic growth, address climate emergency and improve public services and community well-being. And the evidence that we took 2 weeks ago in the session, people against it, New Galway National Park, didn't think of any economic levers or there would be benefits to public services. They actually thought it would be detrimental to the area. So if the national parks that we have and the key drivers there, is there examples that you would give from the national parks in existence that have created support economic growth, climate emergency and increased public services and well-being?
I think there is evidence in the national parks. The national park in Cairngorms has done quite a lot of work with local businesses. I think there's something like 100 businesses now that have the national park brand and are using that in their promotion and are finding that beneficial. We know that the parks have been very successful in supporting visitors, supporting tourism, and doing that in a way that is helping that to be sustainable and, you know, reduce the impacts on any vulnerable sites, but also on communities that are facing problems with visitor management. So there have been lots of strong examples of positive action that's been underway. But I think, again, it's important to understand that national parks can't do everything. Obviously, they have a focus on local communities, on supporting nature and climate change, supporting local communities. Sustainable use of natural resources is where their strengths lie. There are areas around, health or transport that are not within their remit. So I think we need to be clear, and I hope the consultation does that national parks are not a panacea for all the issues that local communities have, but there are things that they can do and do well, and that convening power, the promotion and the strength of the brand is something that can be harnessed and can be quite effective for business communities. I don't know if there's anything more that you want to add or any more you want to explore on that.
I mean, just to say some of the work we're doing as part of the reporting work, working with SOSI and Visit Scotland, trying to tease out some of that economic impact, specifically in relation to the proposal. And also Scottish Government are undertaking, the work, preparatory work now on a business regulatory impact assessment, which would be needed alongside any decision to designate. So we'll be collecting data and the evidence that's available in the Galloway region as part of the work that we're doing as a report, and Scottish Government will be doing as part of their formal process of designation if they proceed.
Thank you for that. Around national parks and evidence last week, Nick Kemp, and I'm going to quote here, administration is exactly the same, planning systems are exactly the same, forestry grants is exactly the same, agricultural grants are exactly the same. Is it time that we have an independent review into national parks to have a look at if there's anything there we can actually change in the new ones that are proposed or existing ones?
Sorry, just to clarify the question, do you mean to enable people within national parks
Yes.
to access these grants in a different way?
Or just to change the whole type of planning systems or agricultural grants or forestry grants. It's the same in every national park. Can we do something different?
I think it's a good question. It's something that I think is something obviously for government to consider as well in terms of the sort of regulatory platform that exists. What national parks, I think, do, although obviously those regulatory and grant systems operate across the whole of Scotland, what national parks do is help provide the advice, the support, the guidance to enable people to access these more effectively. And so what they've often done is provided advisory support or bringing people together so that there's some shared learning, and also sometimes that these applications can be done collaboratively over a larger scale. So within Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park, they've got the Great Trossachs Forest, which is operating at a landscape scale, multiple owners coming together, and the national park's been able to do that in a way that's made, the join up made the better than the, sum of the parts. So that's generally what they're able to do, is the national park plans present that vision, and that means when those proposals go through that system of grants, they're already built on a clear vision, a clear sort of articulation of what the benefits are. So it enables them to be supported, you know, with kind of more streamlined and more likelihood of success, because they're built on that kind of fundamental vision.
Around changing an independent review, should national parks have more powers to be able to enforce different things in the areas that they represent?
We've asked that question quite a few times over many years. There are a lot of powers within Scottish Government and within public bodies which exist already, and there hasn't ever been a convincing case for the national parks to have more powers to stop things. Although some would say that that's required. I guess the interesting thing in here is about national parks have been under sort of review since 22. We consulted and then provided advice to government. Government then consulted on changes to the National Parks Act, which I think is probably a topic we'll get onto in a moment. And our advice to ministers at the time in 23 was basically the park aims are delivered through a collective approach by Scottish Government, and that's all brought together through the park plan. So it's almost about beefing up or strengthening the ability of the park authority to convene and make sure that government policies in an area and local policies in the area are better aligned, rather than having new powers per se.
A final question, Convener. Around the management or board of national parks, we've heard evidence that it should be made of a bigger, broader church, should we say, but it should take in a lot of different areas because it is very limited to people who are on it. And what would you say to that?
The existing national park or the approach that's taken to identify who the member should be is set out in legislation, and obviously a majority have to be locally based, and that's set out. So there is scope for local authorities obviously to identify individuals with either a local representative role or a specialist interest. So there are opportunities within the existing system either to focus on geographical representation or themes of interest or expertise. And there are obviously government appointees as well, and government can identify what are the particular specialisms that they think are appropriate to any national park to make sure that they have the full range of skills. So the existing national parks are boards are quite large and have a wide range of expertise and lots of local knowledge and expertise and lived experience. So I think they do reflect the broad range of interests that need to be there to guide the National Park Plan and then, you know, ongoing decisions and implementation of that plan. So I think there's scope within the existing system to make sure that you have the right people around the table. That's certainly the experience that we've heard to date.
Thank you.
And if I may, a little earlier, I heard you say, and I think others, I think it might have been Nick Kemp, said that there were alternative and complementary mechanisms to the designation of a national park that might achieve a similar outcome. And I just wondered if you can give some examples of what alternative or complementary ways forward might be that would deliver these results.
It's set out a little bit in the consultation document, and obviously will be, has been a topic of interest, and we've been discussing that in the events we've been at. There is obviously the biosphere that exists already, so that has a large area. It encompasses the largest area that's being consulted on. That's been working effectively, has got support, funding support, and is a way of identifying, opportunities and doing some of the work that a national park would do. It does have some challenges in that the funding is not secure. They have to bid for funding. They don't have, they don't have the same legislative structure, and therefore they don't command the same degree of sort of power or influence. There's also bodies like SOSI, the South of Scotland Enterprise Agency, and they are working very effectively in addressing the range of kind of social and economic issues that are affecting the Galloway area. So those are two examples of groups that exist and could do some of the activity that a national park could do. So we are certainly open to people's views on whether some form of those existing or something in addition or some beefed up way of supporting those organisations is an alternative that people think is one that should be supported. So.
And the advantage then of the national park designation is what the kind of authority that comes with the structure of a national park. Is that essentially?
Yes, that's right. You know, they have a formal role, they have a statutory role,
yeah.
They have funding that's secure, they have, the powers that are ultimately determined to be appropriate, and so they bring them with them a status and a role and a profile, I think, that these existing bodies don't currently, but, obviously that's something that can be explored and expanded on.
Okay, thank you. Our third theme this morning is on Nature Scot reporter process and sort of including local engagement, and Marie McNair is going to take these questions forward. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, panel. It's great to see you this morning. Thanks for your time. The Scottish Government has said, and I'll quote, any new national parks should be designated in response to local community demand. What is your approach to assessing local demand for the Galloway proposal? Obviously covering kind of diverse interests and obviously the sort of rural areas there.
I think Pete's been heavily involved in that, so I'll pass on to him.
So the consultation is now live, and the reporting work is in sort of 3 phases. We've done the pre-consultation work where we spread information, we talked to lots of people and lots of communities across the area and stakeholder groups, and now we're into the sort of formal consultation phase. We're trying to make that as accessible as possible to a whole range of different people in different communities across the area. There is an online survey, long version, a short version. We have organised with a consultancy a programme of open public meetings across the area. We're continuing to meet with stakeholders like NUS and their members during this consultation period. And we're also trying to do as much bespoke work as we can with young people and other groups who tend not to take part in these formal consultations as well. So we're doing a lot. The other thing we're doing, and we're still reviewing how we do it better this time around, is the leaflet. We distributed an information leaflet to households in the area via Royal Mail. That's been a bit patchy, I think, from some of the feedback we've got. And we're planning to do something similar with a consultation leaflet. That will go in the second half of November. So we're trying to reach as many people as possible. There are maybe up to 60,000 people in the area, so it's quite a big ask to reach as many people as possible. But the measures we've put in place, we think, will guarantee a very good response to this consultation and allow us to come to a view about community interest and desire for this park.
It's not without its challenges in terms of the geographical area you've got to cover there, absolutely. Do you feel empowered by the Scottish Government to conclude that there is insufficient local demand, and ever to find and conclude that was the case? I'd really be interested to find your thoughts on that one.
I mean, yes, absolutely. The consultation is live. We've had 100 responses already, so it's drawing people in, and that's great. I think a lot of people will reserve judgment till they've been, involved in some of these discussions, and so we expect it to build up over the course of the consultation period. And as you know, that's been extended at, the request, particularly from local MSPs, and that was in response to the feedback we got. So, the consultation is designed to be very open. There will be a full and thorough analysis of that, and that will all be presented to government, and it will be all available for scrutiny, and obviously Scottish Government will have access to all the material and all the responses, and we're asking people obviously to identify where they come from as well, and hopefully to make their responses available so that we can put as much information out there in the public domain. We want this to be as transparent as possible, and we will fully and accurately respond follow up and analyse it and respond on what we receive. So it is absolutely still all open, and if that response is clearly telling us that there isn't the local support, then that will be what will be presented to government.
Thank you. Initially, obviously, in the pre-consultation, what was the kind of main concerns kind of raised from communities and sectors? Obviously, we heard earlier on, obviously, the concerns expressed by the farmers, you know. Can you maybe expand on kind of other responses?
Do you want to start? Yeah.
I think we've had a lot of really useful insight in the consultation paper. Lists about 20 things that have come up. If I could summarise them, they're a lot to do with concerns over tourism in the area and the impact that might have on land managers, but also communities in terms of traffic and transport, pollution. Is the infrastructure in place sufficient to actually cope with that? Another stream has been about the impact on house prices and concerns that it will make the issues worse in the area rather than any better. And then there's also been a sort of stream about concerns about it being top-down and bureaucratic and imposed and run by Scottish Government rather than through a National Park Authority. So understanding about the process has also come out as well. The A75 has featured in a lot of the discussions too.
Was there any surprises within that? Obviously, you know, there's a lot of things you'd expect within it, but anything that kind of popped out you weren't expecting?
I think the one thing we've heard and we're now following up is around the impact on healthcare facilities, and particularly two aspects. One about housing for healthcare staff, one about being able to do the job, travelling around the area as well. So we'll pick that up with NHS Dumfries and Galloway and think about the implications of those issues, whether they're significant or not. Didn't feature in the first designation of the first two national parks, but that was quite a long time ago. So yeah, that is the nature of the process we're doing. We're listening, we're responding to what people tell us, and we're trying to take those issues forward in the consultation as part of our advice.
Thank you. Convener, that's me just now.
Thank you very much. And Faisal Chowdhury is going to take us into the next section, which is looking at the forthcoming legislation. Faisal.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, panel. The Scottish Government has proposed to make changes to national parks legislation in a bill due to come out later in this parliamentary year. Is the fact that the process is running alongside your investigation creating any challenges, for example, in enabling you to tell the community what a Galloway National Park might look like?
I mean, the Scottish Government made it very clear that we're reporting under the current legislation, not the future legislation. So that's the basis of the consultation that's going forward at the moment. If they introduce changes to the National Parks Act as part of the National Environment Bill, we will communicate that. It does complicate, I guess, the communication around the messages, but we can certainly see the opportunity presented by the Natural Environment Bill to make some of the changes that have been discussed for a number of years. So we understand that's going ahead. The government, I guess, will consider our advice alongside changes to the Natural Environment Bill, or changes to the National Park legislation come spring. So there will be time to think about are there implications about the changes. We don't know at this stage what the changes are, of course. So there's a bit hypothetical here until those changes come out into the public domain.
Are you worried in thinking that there might be something comes up as a surprise?
No, not worried. I've got other things to worry about, I think. But yes, no, not worried.
I think it's probably worth saying that, as Pete illustrated earlier, that, you know, there are more stages in the process where these things will obviously come, before the designation order is consulted on, then we would expect any changes to the national park to have been identified. And, so I think at that stage, the consultation will evolve and be clearer. If there are new powers that would affect the new proposal, that will be embedded in that further consultation. So there'll be obviously, that time for people to consider what's definitely on the table if things emerge from that, from that parliamentary process.
My final question. The committee has heard some views that national parks lacks the power to do things differently and that the model should be strengthened before new designations are made. What are your views on that? Will the legislative proposal make a significant difference to how national parks operate?
Well, I would say that the proposals are an evolution, not revolution, so they're a refinement. They are a means of sort of clarifying some of the governance arrangements, clarifying some of the ways that public bodies work together, so they would strengthen the ability of a national park to work and to be more effective in their convening role, in bringing people together, in identifying, the powers and the board that will represent government's priorities. But I think they're an evolution and not a radical change. So I think in our view that they wouldn't change fundamentally the way national parks are established and the work they do and how they operate. So I don't think it's going to make much difference to what the national parks will look like, and certainly not sufficient to, pause things and wait and see how that evolves. So I think we're pretty well. We obviously follow that process and see how it emerges.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I articulate one theme of the petition is the instruction of an independent review? And the Scottish Government were kind of enthusiastic, but there was a general feeling, I think, within the committee that after 20 years it doesn't seem unreasonable that there should be some independent review. And what some of the witnesses we heard from last week said was that, a consultation process on two fronts. One, that Nature Scott has got a vested interest in the outcome of the consultation, is therefore not truly independent in its analysis of what emerges. And secondly, that a consultation itself, although there will be people that come forward and contribute, nonetheless elicits only the information that is forthcoming from those people that choose to participate in the consultation, which is not necessarily always the complete picture. And that the merits of an independent review would be that somebody was charged with proactively going out to ask questions, whether or not the issues that they had asked had been volunteered by a body of people, an individual or whatever, as a consequence of a consultation. So I'm just interested to know what your perspective is on that ask within the petition, where they wanted to have that review look at the different aspects of farming, forestry, crofting, angling, all of that sort of stuff, in order that, Parliament and the wider public have got some sort of holistic view of what the success and development, how near to its original conception, to what extent it's evolved, the current national parks that we have been. And I just wonder what your view of that aspect of the petition is.
Yes, we're obviously aware that that was, a key part of the petition, and ultimately it would be for the Scottish Government to decide to undertake that review. There is certainly, a very open and transparent process that's there within the existing national parks, where they have a national park plan and they report on performance, and they have their boards that hold them to account to determine whether they're being effective or not. So I think much like other areas of government, there's built-in monitoring, review, and opportunities to, reflect and for government to guide that going forward. So, that is the basis for the new park being proposed, government thinking that they were effective and therefore an additional national park would be of benefit. And I think you know, we have to remember that the genesis of this is, you know, there's a nature and climate change emergency. You know, we have COP29 at the moment. We had COP26 just a few years ago in Glasgow that, you know, I'm sure you'll all remember. And there is a genuine desire, and I think Scotland has been a leader and the government has continued to want to aspire to be ambitious and to continue to support action to address climate change and the biodiversity loss. And national parks are really well geared up to do that and are operating at that landscape scale and are taking action which is directly addressing those two threats. So I think that's the basis on which government has gone forward and put this proposal for a new national park. So it seems that the case is there and that is what government's working on. Whether there's subsequently a review or not will be, you know, for Minister to determine. In terms of sort of our role and our ability to be independent, we've done the reporter role for the two existing national parks, and I think it's quite a complex role. It's not just somebody that can run a consultation. It's having the expertise of people who understand landscape, understand the culture, nature, and can put together all of that into sort of maps, proposals. So there's quite a lot of analysis, geographic information support, a lot of work behind the scenes. And it's quite difficult to see how that could be done by commissioning an external consultants to come in and lead that. But we have brought in, obviously, extra expertise and an independent consultancy agencies to do that engagement so we can make sure that's done by experts in the field and people that are, you know, arm's length and can feed into the consultation process. The other bit that it's probably worth the committee knowing is that there will be an independent analysis of the consultation that we're undertaking as well to make sure it's been inclusive, it's been open, it's been sufficiently you know, structured so that we've reached out to as wide a group of representative interests as we can. So I think there's quite a lot of checks and balances in place that mean we can be pretty confident the consultation will be run well. I would say that, wouldn't I? But, you know, we have the expertise, we have the capacity, and we are very open and willing to be responding to any new ideas that come forward.
Up on that point, the independent analysis of the consultation, what will the process be that generates that?
Do you want to just talk to that?
Like we did with the Cairngorms, and the Loch Lomond will commission an independent body, probably a university. That's what happened in the Cairngorms. So we'll be asking someone to check our homework and make sure.
Some sort of academic arm's length organisation that can have a look and analyse that.
It will be arm's length from us. We might have to pay them to do that, but yes,
right.
That's the idea.
And just a final question that also came as a result of the evidence we heard last week. Of course, there was some comment that it may be the Galloway National Park, but it runs into South Ayrshire and it covers other territory too. And the feeling that this is a much more populated area with very established concerns within it, which make it quite distinct from potentially the Cairngorms or wherever else. And just this concern that there was that the kind of thinking would be the kind of development of a similar kind of arrangement which would really not work in their way for them, because it would interfere and potentially undermine quite a bit of what was there. I think you said earlier on that the consultation is about developing a proposal that would meet those challenges, but I wonder if you could just, for the record, confirm that is very much your view.
Yes, I mean, we are very aware that the geography and the population and the issues in Galloway are quite different, and that population density and pattern is depending on where the boundary option might end up, that would obviously change things. And also the land management pattern that we've said, the wind farms, the farming communities are very different, so that needs to be reflected. In terms of the population and the different kind of nature of settlements and the different issues that come with that. We've had a lot of engagement with the local authorities, particularly Dumfries and Galloway local authority officials, and we are engaging with the other Ayrshire, South Ayrshire, North Ayrshire. So we are using the expertise and knowledge within those local authorities to sort of guide us on what those issues would be and what a national park might need to do to address them. So I think that's, you know, we are doing our best to reflect what we are hearing and the different circumstances and situations that exist in the Galloway area that's being explored.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions from the committee? Is there anything further you might like to just add into the narrative that we've perhaps not touched on this morning?
I think we've covered things very well, and we really genuinely, it's really good to get your proposals or your thoughts, your questions, because that's going to help us as well understand what concerns that are emerging. So, no, very, very happy with the discussion, and more than happy to come back or to explore any of these things in more detail as the process evolves.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the evidence you've given us this morning, which has helped build up our profile of the issue. We'll be continuing this consideration of this petition at our next meeting on the 27th of November, when we'll be hearing from the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, Land Reform and the Islands. Members, are you content to reflect on the evidence we've had later in our private session? You are, thank you. In which case, I'll suspend shortly in order to allow us to let the witnesses and others leave. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome back. And our next continued petition is petition number 1896 to provide every primary school child in Scotland with a reusable water bottle. This was lodged quite some time ago now by Callum Isted. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to replace the disposable water bottle provided with primary school lunches with a sustainable reusable metal bottle. In fact, it's so long ago, I think we're on to our third First Minister since the petition was lodged. We are joined once again in our consideration of this petition by our MSP colleague Sue Webber. Good morning to you, Ms Webber. The last consideration of this petition was in January 24th, when we agreed to write to the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills. And members will recall that the Cabinet Secretary had asked each local authority for information on how water is provided to pupils within their schools, how they meet sustainability requirements in this regard, and whether local authorities might be interested in participating in a national procurement exercise for reusable metal water bottles. We then asked whether she would be willing to progress a procurement exercise with the local authorities who had indicated an interest in obtaining reusable bottles. The Cabinet Secretary's response explained that because only 13 local authorities were interested, and with 6 of them noting that central funding was contingent on them developing that interest, the Scottish Government has determined that it will not take forward work on a national procurement exercise at this time. So before we decide what options are left open to us, I wonder whether Sue Webber would like to address the committee.
Thank you, Convener. I suppose it just goes back to the longevity that this petition has been in front of you. And if you remember the furore and the activity that came around Callum's first appearance here with the First Minister at that time, who promised him significant and to keep his hopes up. He's a very determined campaigner. Whatever the outcome of this committee decision is today, I know that Callum will still be fighting long and hard for environmental issues that are close to his heart. He continues to campaign for a variety of things locally, and as I said, he's a real determined young lad, and I'm proud of everything that he has done to bring this issue. If we are to challenge each and every one of our own decisions around how we interact and take forward sustainable goals, this was something that he determined was a quick win, albeit there may have been cost implications. It's disappointing that only 13 local authorities have expressed an interest, but I'm sure he'll carry on doing that. And perhaps, Convener, if you don't mind, you did make note that there have been 2 First Ministers since Ms Sturgeon was the First Minister that promised Callum a visit to Bute House. That promise has never been honoured, and I was wondering if perhaps the committee might ask the current First Minister if they might extend an invitation to Callum Isted to Bute House now, if that's okay.
Well, I think that's the easiest thing for us to consider doing. Well, what age is Callum now?
Oh, you're going to ask. He's 9. I might get his age wrong.
Is he just 9? He must be older.
No, he's older than that. I'm not very good with ages. I'm going to say he's about that tall compared to me now. But
it was 7 when he started. But
so he's probably 9 now.
Is it just...
Yeah.
Don't doubt that.
I met him the other week.
You mean with the 3 First Ministers in 2 years?
Yeah, I did meet him the other week, and he's as determined as ever.
Yeah.
So, as I said, yeah.
Are there any other suggestions from the committee? Marie McNair.
Thank you, Convener. I was just suggesting earlier on that we might want to contact Scottish Water and ask them to take this on board to see if they can work with Callum.
Yep, that's an interesting thought. Faisal Chowdhury.
I think we should ask the First Minister as well that if he... I don't think we've asked the current First Minister about this petition, so get the current First Minister involved as well on this and write to COSLA and see if we can still keep this open.
I think we've done that, actually, myself. David Torrance?
Convener, can I just say I think the committee's already done that, and we have got the answers back from the government and from COSLA. And it's with regret, because I think Callum was absolutely fantastic in front of the committee, and I've got to commend him and all the work that he's doing, but I do not think the committee can take the petition further. And I would ask the committee to close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that the Scottish Government does not intend to take forward work on a national procurement exercise for reusable water bottles at this time.
Okay. Are the committee minded? What I think I would like to do is 2 things. One, I think we will write to the First Minister, just saying that Callum remains interested in having the opportunity to visit Bute House. But I think, secondly, in recognition of the fact that Callum was the youngest ever petitioner to come before this Parliament, which was quite remarkable in itself, and, as David Torrance said, his composure and focus on the issue he presented to the committee was exemplary. I think it would be appropriate for this committee, on behalf of the Parliament, to present him with a certificate acknowledging the fact that he achieved that milestone in the lifetime of this Parliament, and particularly in its 25th year. I think would be a very nice way to recognise the contribution that he's made to the consideration of an important matter here in the Scottish Parliament. So we'll take forward those 2 actions, and hopefully we will manage to have the First Minister facilitate that visit. Thirdly, I think as we close the petition, I think the committee will write to Scottish Water now and say this is the position so far as us being able to progress this matter forward with the Scottish Government, but might Scottish Water, as a national supplier, obviously, of water in Scotland, be interested in potentially the sponsorship of a reusable metal water bottle scheme for pupils throughout Scotland, and to draw Callum's petition and the work that he's done to their attention, and if they have any interest, certainly to try and facilitate further engagement on that basis. The committee content? Agreed. We are. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to petition number 1864, which is to increase the ability of communities to influence planning decisions for onshore wind farms, lodged by Aileen Jackson on behalf of Scotland Against Spin. And the petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to increase the ability of communities to influence planning decisions for onshore wind farms by adopting English planning legislation for the determination of onshore wind farm developments, empowering local authorities to ensure local communities are given sufficient professional help to engage in the planning process, and by appointing an independent advocate to ensure that local participants are not bullied and intimidated during public inquiries. And we've been joined by our MSP colleagues Brian Whittle and Douglas Lumsden. Brian Whittle, who of course has maintained an interest in this petition over a number of years now. We last considered it on February the 21st last year, when we agreed to write to the Scottish Government seeking an update on efforts to ensure effective community engagement in planning issues and its work to explore the scope for planning authorities to determine more applications for onshore wind farm developments. I'm struck that we last considered this petition on my wedding anniversary. I can't think that it could have been a more exciting way to spend it. We've received a response from the then Minister for Local Government, Empowerment and Planning in March this year, which indicates that the guidance on effective community engagement in local development planning is anticipated to be published later this year. The response also highlights the consultation on resourcing Scotland's planning system, which included a question on whether the current 50 megawatt threshold should be raised, enabling planning authorities to determine more applications for onshore wind farms. The Minister also states that the UK and Scottish governments are in agreement that the Scottish energy consenting system needs to be reformed, with our papers for today noting that a consultation on a package of proposals for reforms spanning the consenting process, including pre-application community engagement, will be open for responses until the 29th of this month. We've also received new submissions from the petitioner expressing continued concern about the unequal playing field, particularly for people participating in public inquiries, noting that they have written directly to the Minister about the lack of professional support available to members of the public and to community groups who are wishing to take part in these processes. The petitioner also draws our attention to the outcome of the Scottish Government's consultation on planning resources, which indicated support for the raising of the 50 megawatt threshold, with the petitioner concerned that while action has been taken to progress other proposals from this consultation, little progress has been made on this matter. And in the first instance, I would ask whether Brian Whittle would like to say anything to the committee that we might take into consideration.
Thank you very much, Convener. And yes, you're right. This is an ongoing petition over some time, and it's the same issues that keep arising. Just for the committee's background here, I have currently got 6 individual casework items open on 6 different wind farms in the south of Scotland. And I'll not take too long, but the basics on the thread running through all of these is that inability of communities to be properly heard and be involved in consultation. And I have a whole list across this of that. And one of the things that strikes me is we did a survey around where I had a look at all of these cases, and we looked at the public's response and to the building of either wind farms or in fact solar farms as well. And those against, and one of them was 57 and 4 were 2. Next one was 58 and 1 against, 1 for, sorry. 57 against, 2 for. 57 against, 1 for. And things like consideration around the impact of development of the local environment, there was a huge amount of worry about that, and impact in the value of their house. I think what I've always said to the wind farm developers when I have met them is try to stress to them that the most important thing they should be doing is at the earliest possible time, they should make sure that they're consulting with the local communities. And even though they all say, absolutely, that's what we're going to do, the overwhelming feeling I get and the overwhelming reports I get from all the constituency works that I've done along this is that is avoided. And the feeling is that even if locally there's a vote against these wind farms, they know the public believe that all that the wind farm developers have to do is then refer that to the Scottish Government. It'll be passed, and so their overwhelming feeling is that their views are not heard at all. So I do commend the petitioner for this. As I said, I can speak from, I represent an area that has a high density of wind farms and future wind farms, and the same thing still, there doesn't seem to be any movement at all in how that consultation is taking place and the interaction between wind farm developers and the local community. So I'll leave my comments there. Convener.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whittle. Mr. Lumsden, this is your debut with this committee. Very pleased to have you along this morning, and also very keen to hear any contribution you might wish to put before the committee as we consider this petition.
Thank you, Convener, and thanks to the committee for the opportunity to come and speak to you all today. I know this petition has been ongoing for over 3 years. Like the last petition, I think it's been 3 First Ministers in that time. And I fear, you mentioned earlier, Convener, about the consultation that's taken place with the UK and Scottish governments just now on proposals on electricity infrastructure consenting in Scotland. And I fear with those proposals coming forward, I think it's actually, we're going in the opposite direction on than the petitioner would actually would hope. Because for me, these proposals are an attack on local devolution. These proposals are an attempt to, actually, I feel, railroad through electricity infrastructure projects, wind farms, pylons, substations, etc., against the will of local communities. These dangerous proposals are basically Scottish ministers saying to our local communities, we don't care what you think. We're going to push forward with this proposals anyway. Because at present, local elected planning authorities can object to proposals, and this would cause a public inquiry to be held. These proposals would actually change all of that, but an objection would actually trigger a process where Scottish ministers would appoint someone to examine the application, and they would decide if further evidence is required. The stated purpose of these changes is to speed up the consenting process, but these changes undermine local communities in having a voice to speak up against the detrimental changes to many of our rural communities, many of which are in the northeast of Scotland. And more and more, it seems like a David versus Goliath scenario. And communities are finding it harder and harder to fight against these proposals by generation companies. The legal costs make it hard for communities to fight up, while the generation companies have very deep pockets. The reduced timeframes proposed make it harder for communities to fight it, while the generation companies have paid staff to work to the tight timescales. And the erosion of locally elected decisions make it harder for communities to fight these planning applications. And more, it seems like it's a rigged system against our local communities. So, in Convener, I get that our energy system is changing, but these changes must be done with our communities and not to them. And because I feel we're in danger of destroying our countryside forever. How often do we look at pictures of our cities and see, where once a magnificent building once stood, and instead it's been demolished and some concrete things been put up in place, and we think, how on earth did they get planning permission to do that? And I think that when we look at what's happening to our countryside, in years to come, people will look back and say, how on earth did they get permission to do that? And I think it will be because of people probably in Edinburgh deciding that they know better than our rural communities. So I urge the committee to press the government to ensure that our communities are heard and to make sure that we listen to those communities and not press forward with some of these infrastructure projects that we may think is the right thing to do just now, but will have a long-lasting effect that we probably can never overturn.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, this is an issue that is familiar to the committee because we have petitions that come from time to time addressing these issues. There is work that's supposedly underway, but it's not yet crystallised into a formal date. I wonder if we've got any proposals from the committee as to how we might proceed. Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Convener. I'm just a little bit concerned that we closed the petition when we haven't seen the published guidance from the Scottish Government as yet. So, potentially we could write to the Minister for Public Finance seeking further information on when that guidance will be published, as well as an update on work to progress proposals for raising the current 50 megawatt threshold to allow planning authorities to determine more applications for onshore wind farms. And finally, more information on what consideration the Scottish Government has given to ensuring support is available to members of the public who wish to participate in public inquiries. But I do fear we're reaching the end of our involvement with this, but I think there's still some action.
The point is very much the point in the petitioner's latest submission, which is that they do feel that the deck is still stacked. And I think the point that both Mr Lumsden and Mr Whittle made, that the protagonists have got much deeper pockets than the individuals within the community who might want to contribute to the process, who find themselves, I think the analogy that was made was a kind of David Goliath position where they find it very hard to do so. So I think that seems to me to be an excellent suggestion. Are there any other thoughts from the committee, or are we content to keep the petition open and proceed on that basis? Mr Torrance?
I'm happy to back the recommendations, Convener, but I wonder with the UK Government having their consultation package open just now, we could highlight it to the petitioner so they could take part in it.
Yes, I think we could do that as well. Thank you. So we will keep the petition open and we will proceed to seek to find out what progress is being made on the effective community engagement proposals as have been promised. Thank you very much to Mr Whittle and to Mr Lumsden. That brings us to petition number 1941 to stop the destruction of headstones within community cemeteries. This was lodged by Councillor Andrew Stewart Wood and calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to monitor and regulate actions by local authorities when undertaking their statutory duty of ensuring health and safety within our cemeteries. And we last considered this on the 24th of January 2024 when we agreed to write to the Scottish Government. And members may remember, those colleagues who were on the committee at the time, that we had a pretty extensive portfolio of illustrative examples of the destruction of headstones within cemeteries, or those that had just been buried with half the, to make them more secure ostensibly, but with half of the headstone now missing so that people couldn't see who in fact it was, whose burial it was marking. The Scottish Government is taking forward the development of the draft burial regulations, and as part of that work it consulted on the management of burial grounds application for burial exhumation, private burial and restoration of layers. And the analysis of this consultation has now been published. And the key findings include the support for the introduction of a burial management plan, agreement with the proposed powers to enable burial authorities to manage and maintain burial grounds to a safe standard, and support for the proposal to require burial authorities to contact layer holders prior to taking corrective action to a layer, headstone or other memorial. So in view of the fact that that has been agreed and is to progress, what do members have by way of any suggestions or comments for action? David Torrance?
Thank you, Convener. Looking at the petition's aims, I think they've been mainly achieved, so I wonder if we could close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that the Scottish Government has consulted on the draft regulations for burials under Burial and Cremation Scotland Act 2016, published the analysis and will consider its findings when developing the draft burial regulations.
Okay, are members content? Then we will close the petition. I mean, again, I think it's open to the petitioner in a subsequent Parliament if it's felt that, in fact, notwithstanding the commitment that's now been given to bringing forward these regulations, the situation still persists. There will be an opportunity to bring forward a fresh petition. But we thank the petitioner and are pleased that the Scottish Government is taking forward the actions originally established within the petition. Petition number 1945 to ban the extraction and use of peat for horticulture and all growing media by 2023. This was lodged by Elizabeth Otway. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to place a legal ban on the extraction of peat imports, exports and sales in order to protect peatlands both in Scotland and worldwide. And we last considered this petition on the 7th of February. And again, we agreed to write to the Scottish Government. And their response states that the Scottish Government hoped to legislate for a ban on the sale of peat during this parliamentary term. In response to our clarification on their position regarding peat extraction, the submission confirms that there are no current plans to ban the extraction of peat. The submission also states that the government are mindful of crofters and islanders who have relied on peat for fuel for generations and have been clear that any sales ban will not affect crofters cutting peat for their own use as a fuel. On that basis, do I have any suggestions for action from the committee? David Torrance.
And considering the response from the government, I wonder if the committee would consider closing the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standard Orders on the basis that the Scottish Government hopes to legislate for a ban on peat sales in the Parliament term and has no current plans to ban the extraction of peat in Scotland.
Thank you. Are members content to proceed on that basis? So we will close this petition and again note that one of the principal aims of the petition has in fact been achieved, which is good news. Petition number 1946, to call on the Scottish Government to pay all charges for homeless temporary accommodation, lodged by Sean Anthony Clerkin. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to use general taxation to pay for all charges for homeless temporary accommodation, including writing off the £33.3 million debt owed by homeless people for temporary accommodation to local authorities. And we last considered this petition on the 7th of February, and we asked COSLA about its work on recommendation 14 of the Temporary Accommodation Task and Finnish Group's report, which calls for a benchmarking process for temporary accommodation and greater transparency in charges. COSLA's response states that its shared understanding with the Scottish Government is that the Association of Local Authority Chief Housing Officers would have to lead on this, and as housing practitioners and experts, it was clear COSLA would not have the resource for this type of discrete project. The Scottish Government's recent written submission to the committee outlines the duty of local authorities to help people who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. The Scottish Government notes that it established a housing affordability working group which conducted focus group research and is developing a shared understanding of housing affordability. The group was due to send recommendations to ministers before the summer recess. The petitioner's recent written submission points to the housing and homelessness emergency and the cost of living challenges in Scotland. He points to the temporary accommodation debt from 2022, which sat at £33.3 million, and believes that it is this figure that will have increased substantially since that time. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action? David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider writing to the Association of Local Authority Chief Housing Officers seeking information about its work on the recommendation 14 from the Temporary Accommodation Task and Finnish Group report. I wonder if the committee would also consider writing to the Scottish Government requesting further information about the Housing Affordability Working Group recommendations and what action the Scottish Government intends to take in its response.
Okay, two suggestions from Mr Torrance there. Are there any other suggestions to the committee? Are we content to agree to proceed on that basis? So we'll keep the petition open and further examine the options with those requests. Petition number 2006 to review and simplify the legislation in relation to the dismissal of property factors. This has been lodged by Ewan Miller. Calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to amend the Property Factors Scotland Act to cover dismissal of property factors or bring forward other regulations that would achieve the same aim. This could include giving the first-tier tribunal powers to resolve disputes related to the dismissal of property factors. And we are joined once again in our consideration of this petition by our colleague Sarah Boyack. Good morning to you. We last considered the petition on the 7th of February when we agreed to write to the Minister for Victims and Community Safety seeking an update on work to finalise and publish the voluntary code of practice for landowning maintenance companies. We've received a response from the Minister highlighting the mechanisms available to homeowners to remove property factors, which have led her to the view that legislative change at this time is neither necessary nor proportionate. The Minister's response also notes that work has not progressed on the voluntary code of practice as anticipated, adding that the code would only apply where homeowners pay a landowning land maintenance company for the management of open spaces that are owned by that land maintenance company. And therefore, I wonder, Sarah Boyack, if there's anything you would like to say to the committee in the view, in light of what has progressed or not progressed, as it turns out, since we last considered the petition.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Convener, and for the committee for enabling me to come back and give feedback, because it is quite some time since this petition was discussed. And I think the problem is that we still have an accountability problem that our constituents are experiencing on a daily basis. I am disappointed at the fact that we haven't seen that progress on the voluntary code, that we're still reliant on current legislative framework. And I am certainly still getting new constituents getting in touch, not just existing constituents who've already reported their problems. I think the current framework is not user-friendly. The first-tier tribunal is slow, can be daunting, and there's actually a huge amount of investment that people have to make to use it. I think there's a concern that some firms have been found to have failed in their duty on multiple occasions, and yet there are no questions asked about them being factors in this process. I think the challenge of reliance on the Sheriff Court means that legal representation is required. That is expensive. That's on top of bills that people are already paying. So I think it fundamentally comes down to a lack of independent scrutiny, lack of accountability, and no control over rising costs, because at the end of the day, the factors can do what they want. Then there's no incentive to seek best value. One of the issues that's been raised is that factors may actually be linked to developers that have developed a project. Again, that gives you an accountability gap. So although consumer rights are referred to in the legislation, they're not actually implemented. And I think it's a major issue that still needs to be addressed here. I'll just finish. Last time when I spoke, I gave examples of costs. Since I was last in the meeting, representatives have made the point to me that quarterly fees that they are paying in Edinburgh have gone from £300 to £800. Now, that is a huge increase. So I think for a lot of our constituents, this is really a now issue. I very much welcome the fact that the Housing Minister offered us a roundtable. We've seen the CMA report, but we've not had that action yet either. So I'm very concerned that we've not seen any actual progress since the committee last took its evidence. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much. And I mean, it is a similar kind of analogy to one we had earlier of a kind of David and Goliath situation, I think, for many constituents who find themselves up against quite insurmountable odds when dealing with these matters. I do think there are issues still to explore here. I'm not sure that doing so in writing is going to advance us any further, and I think it would be right now to invite the Minister to come and give evidence to the committee. And so if members are content, I think we would invite the Minister to come and we'll explore these issues directly and see whether we can make some progress and understand why progress has not been forthcoming. Are we content? We are. We'll hold the petition open and seek to have that evidence session with the Minister, to which you're more than welcome. And if there's a question or two at the end, I'm sure we'll find scope to allow you to contribute and put it at that point.
Am I allowed to say I very much welcome that commitment by the committee and look forward to hearing when that happens. Thank you very much.
OK, that brings us to item 3, which is actually the consideration of new petitions. I just want to say, as I always do before we start consideration of new petitions, that before we hear a new petition, we invite the Parliament's independent research body, SPICE, to contribute thoughts on the content of the petition, and we also seek a preliminary response from the Scottish Government. And we do that because very often, historically, those were the first two things that we spent a meeting agreeing to do, and it simply expedites our consideration of the petition. The first of the new petitions is petition number 2113, to provide support to RAC-affected communities. And this has been lodged by Wilson and Hannah Chowdhury. It calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to provide support to communities affected by reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, RAAC, RAC, by setting up a national fund to assist struggling homeowners and the tenants affected by RAC, to initiate a public inquiry to investigate the practices of councils and housing associations concerning RAC, including investigating of how business related to RAC was conducted, the handling of safety reports and property sales, disclosure of RAC and responses to homeowner concerns. Introducing or updating legislation similar to the General Product Safety Regulations to ensure developers, councils and housing associations are held accountable for using substandard property materials, mandate risk disclosure, and make surveyors and solicitors liable for untraced defects. Legislation should also include provision for a comprehensive register of high-risk buildings in Scotland. Now, the Spice briefing notes that while the Scottish Government is not currently providing financial support to homeowners or local authorities for RAC remediation work, it has previously operated a scheme to support those who had bought a home designated as having inherent structural defects. In its response to the petition, the Scottish Government set out that the presence of RAC in a building does not necessarily mean that the building is unsafe, and recommends that homeowners follow the Institution of Structural Engineers risk-based approach, as for some properties there may be no issue to address. The response goes on to state that the Scottish Government is committed to working with the UK Government on this issue, and also references the requirement for local authorities to have a scheme for assistance strategy in place, which should set out the support available to private homeowners to make repairs to their home. Mention is also made of plans to review the home report, which is expected to consider how to ensure buyers can make an informed decision in relation to undertaking more detailed surveys, including structural reports establishing how the property is built, what materials are used, and how these will perform in the future. The petitioners have also provided 2 written submissions, the first of which comments on the Scottish Government and raises concerns about the action or lack thereof taken by local authorities to address this issue. In particular, the petitioners highlight that while Scottish councils offer advice and guidance through the scheme of assistance strategy, none offer financial support to homeowners aiming to retain and remediate their properties. The petitioner's second submission follows the recent UK budget and the announcement of an additional £3.4 billion allocation for Scotland, calling for a portion of this funding to be allocated by the Scottish Government to support the needs of homeowners affected by RAC. Now, we've also received submissions from our MSP colleagues Edward Mountain and Murdo Fraser in support of the petition's aims, and therefore we've had quite comprehensive information in advance of our consideration of the petition this morning. Can I ask colleagues whether we have any suggestions as to how we might now proceed with what I think is an important petition, and one which I think many of us have seen some documentary coverage of the issues arising from. David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider keeping the petition open and writing to Build Environment Forum Scotland, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, Chartered Institute of Building, Royal Incorporation of Architects in Scotland, seeking their views on the action called for in this petition. I wonder if the committee would also consider writing to the Minister for Housing, highlight the petitioner's submission, including the concerns that local authority schemes for assistance strategies only offers homeowners advice and guidance, rather than making provision for financial support where repairs are required.
Thank you. Are there any other suggestions? I think we might also seek an update in discussions with the UK Government on funding for RAC remediation. I think that would be reasonable, and the management, including whether the Scottish Government can find any scope in relation to that. And we might also ask the Minister for further information on its plans to review this Scottish Home Report. I do feel that the issues raised in this petition merit some formal taking of evidence at some point. So I would think that the information we're seeking at this stage will help inform the committee, but this is obviously of huge material to concern to those individuals who have been affected by RAC. And depending on whether or not we think the answers we receive allow the aims of the petition to advance in a meaningful way or to be addressed by some other means, I think it might be that we should flag up that it's very much an issue in which we may wish to take evidence from the Minister at a future meeting. Are members content with that? Agreed. So we will keep the petition open. We will take forward the evidence gathering that we have suggested this morning. We will also write to the Minister for Housing to seek responses to the points that have been made by the submissioner to date. And we will do all that, together with information we'll seek from the UK Government as well. And we will do all that with a view to potentially then hearing from the Minister where we can explore these issues in more detail, hopefully, and therefore have some answers and some exploration of them for the many people who've been affected by the issue. I see that I think the petitioners are in the gallery. It's not competent, unfortunately, for contributions from the gallery, but I'm delighted to recognise that you've taken the trouble to come along and hear the petition being considered this morning. And I hope you're pleased that the petition is staying open and we'll be taking forward the issues it seeks to explore. Thank you. We then move on to petition number 2114 to ensure the effective regulation and oversight of social care services in Scotland. This has been lodged by Bill McCabe on behalf of Better Care Scotland, and the petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to ensure the effective regulation and oversight of social care services by replacing the Care Inspectorate with a new independent oversight body that has a specific focus on risk management, uses regulatory and analytical expertise to identify and eradicate poor practice, meaningfully engages with service operators and those with lay expertise to help deliver better, more transparent social care outcomes for the people in Scotland. The SPICE briefing provides us an overview of the Care Inspectorate's qualification requirements for prospective inspectors, noting that specialist training covering regulation, scrutiny and improvement, and an understanding of the different functions of its work, registration, complaints, inspection and enforcement are provided as part of the Care Inspectorate's induction process. Members will also have noted in the briefing that the Scottish Government commissioned an independent review of inspection, scrutiny and regulation of social care in Scotland and has accepted all the recommendations of this review, many of which could be considered pertinent to the asks of the petition. In her response, the Minister for Social Care, Mental Wellbeing and Sport states that in 2019, the Care Inspectorate agreed with ministers that it would take a risk-based, intelligence-led approach to its regulatory activities. The Minister's response also mentions the independent review of inspection, scrutiny and regulation of social care in Scotland, telling us that the Government is taking a phased approach to the implementation of the recommendations to deliver continuous improvement that addresses the key challenges highlighted in the review. Now, we've also received a submission from the petitioner who welcomes the Minister's acknowledgement of the need for radical reform of social care regulation, but thinks it is unrealistic to believe the 38 high-level recommendations of the independent review of inspection, scrutiny and regulation of social care in Scotland will themselves deliver this. The petitioner believes Scotland needs a model of social care regulation which is designed to work in the interests of service users and suggests that the current social care system deters scrutiny. Their submission goes on to state that the lack of support for the National Care Service Bill makes reform of social care regulation as proposed in this petition more urgent than ever. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action? Mr Torrance.
Thank you, Convener, for that. In light of the information we've had, I wonder if we can close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that the Scottish Government has accepted the recommendations of independent review of inspection, scrutiny and regulation of social care with work underway to ensure their implementation. And if it is not to the petitioner satisfactory, the petitioner could bring a new petition in the next Parliament session, and I would urge them to do that.
Okay. I think in the light of the Government's commitment to taking forward actions at this stage, that is going to be the principal way forward. Mr Torrance has made a proposal. Are members prepared to consider to support that? We are. So we thank the petitioner. We take note of their ongoing concerns, but I think these may be something that can be addressed in the light of the work that now takes place. And certainly, if the work that takes place fails to achieve its objective, then I think we would very much encourage the petitioner to come back with a fresh petition in the next Parliament. Petition number 2115 to ensure NHS dental patients have the option of white composite fillings for the treatment of molar teeth. This has been lodged by Paul Aaron, and it calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to ensure white composite fillings are available as a treatment option for registered NHS dental patients, specifically when treating molar teeth. The SPICE briefing notes that while many people choose or prefer composite fillings because they can be coloured to match the existing teeth, amalgam is longer lasting and enables restorations to be carried out more quickly. However, amalgam filling should not normally be provided for patients under 15 years of age, patients who are pregnant or breastfeeding, or patients where there is a letter from secondary care recommending amalgam should not be used due to specific medical concerns. Members may also have noted that as part of wider efforts to protect human health and the environment from the adverse effects of mercury, The European Union has agreed regulations which will ban the use of dental amalgams and prohibit the manufacturing, import and export of other mercury-added products from the 1st of next year, January 2025. In its response to the petition, the Scottish Government state that dental amalgam has been used successfully for over 150 years and has been proven to provide lasting, reliable restorations. The response goes on to highlight the reforms to the NHS dental sector that were introduced in 2023 with the aim of allowing dentists to offer far more effective preventative care and to reduce the requirement for all restorations regardless of the material used. It is the Scottish Government's view that including white fillings in all cases for aesthetic reasons in the absence of an oral health rationale would not be supported within the NHS general dental services. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action? Mr Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider closing the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that resin composite films are available to patients under 15 years of age, pregnant or breastfeeding women, and those who have specific medical conditions that contract the use of dental amalgam. It is the Scottish Government's view that to include white fillings in all cases for aesthetic reasons in the absence of oral health rationale would not be supported within the NHS general dental services.
Okay. A proposal from Mr Torrance in the light of the responses that we've received. Not clear that we can otherwise to make matters forward. I mean, there is obviously the issue of this EU ban, but are we content to proceed with Mr Torrance's proposal? We are. So we thank the petitioner for bringing the issue forward, but unable to take the issues raised further forward for the reasons stated by Mr Torrance. That brings us to the final of the new petitions that we are considering this morning, which is petition 2117, which is to ban the use of toxic chemicals along our coasts, lodged by Bruce Whitehead. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to ban the use of any chemical labelled, and I quote, very toxic to aquatic life with long-lasting effects, or carrying, and again in quotes, dead fish pictogram graphic on coastal jetties and slipways. The key legal framework in Scotland for protecting the water environment is provided by the Water Environment Controlled Activities Scotland Regulations 2011, or CAR regime. The framework covers both direct discharges into the water environment or where there is a risk of diffuse population from activities on land. Under this regime, SEPA's role is to assess the risk of proposed activities before deciding whether to grant an authorisation. The Scottish Government considers this to be a regulatory matter and points to the GB regulatory framework, which is in place to prevent or minimise harm to people and wildlife from the use of biocides used amenity settings. The response to the petition states that the Scottish Government does not believe it has a role or that there is a reason for Scottish ministers to intervene. The petitioner explains that he is concerned about the use of chemicals at Hawes Pier and believes that the conditions of SEPA's authorisation have been breached. He shares that manual application of the authorised chemical has led to spillages over the pier edge and into the river and in unpermitted weather conditions. Are there any suggestions for action? Mr Torrance?
Thank you, Convener. I generally don't think the committee could take this petition any further, and I wonder if the committee would consider closing it under 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that a GB-wide regulatory framework is in place to prevent or minimise harm to people and wildlife from the use of biocides. The CAR regime in Scotland covers both direct discharges into the water environment or where there is a risk to diffuse pollution from activities on land, with SEPA assessing the risk of proposed activities before granting, if appropriate, any authorisation. And many factors beyond labelling are required to assess the risk a product poses to wildlife. Algae remover concentrate has been authorised as a safe for use referred to in the petition by a Health and Safety Executive, and the Scottish Government considers issues raised to be a regulatory matter with a robust framework in place. Therefore, it does not believe there is a role for the Government or a reason for Scottish ministers to intervene.
Okay, a suggestion, Mr. Torrance. Mr. Chowdhury?
Can we also, I don't know, can we also write to the City of Edinburgh Council to see if there is any concerns what petitioners are raising in his petition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Mr. Torrance has proposed that there are grounds to close the petition. I think there's nothing more we can actually do given the Scottish Government's response. But I think I would, in closing the petition, suggest that the committee writes to SEPA, drawing their attention to the petitioner's view about the situation at Hawes Pier and the fact that it would appear that their conditions for authorisation have been breached. I think, it would be for them to respond to that. And also his contention in relation to the manual application of the authorised chemical leading to spillages over the pier edge and into the river and unpermitted weather conditions. So while I don't think we could take things forward given the government's response, we can draw that attention quite directly on behalf of the committee. And I'm just clarify again, Mr. Chowdhury, who you'd like us to write City of Edinburgh Council to establish what? Sorry.
To establish if there is any concerns petitioners raising in his petitions, or any councils, because if we close the petition, that's the end of it. But if there is some concerns, which is,
all right. I wonder if we could potentially address that within the same letter to SEPA and see whether we could do it. I don't think there's any more that the committee can do, but I think we can actually invite SEPA to consider these issues and to see whether or not they feel sufficiently that the action is sufficiently robust.
I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Are we content to proceed on that basis? We are. That brings us to the end of the formal part of today's meeting, and we now move into private session.